Hello, I'm architect Gauri. I run a practice called Studio 9.9 in Cochin. I also teach at KMEA College of Architecture. It is my honor and privilege to welcome architect Robert Verrijt of Architecture Brio to the third edition of Living Monsoon hosted by IIA Cochin Center. It is my honor and privilege to welcome architect Robert Verrijt of Architecture Brio to the third edition of Living Monsoon hosted by IIA Cochin Center. Architecture Brio is a leading architectural practice with offices in Mumbai and Netherlands and was founded by architect Robert Verrijt and architect Shefali Balwani. They excel in creating spaces that are both harmonious and distinctive with their natural surrounding, addressing challenges of urbanization, cultural diversity and climate change. They also actively engage in academic collaborations and research in India and abroad. We are very excited to have you with us here. Once again, I welcome you to Living Monsoon Edition 3 hosted by IIA Cochin Center.
I'm very happy to be here.
So, Architect Robert, to begin with, how did your early experiences in Sri Lanka, especially with the works of architect Jeffrey Bawa, inspire you, or how did it influence your practice later in life?
I think the experience in Sri Lanka was one of the founding elements of our career as architects. It was the second practice that I started working in. After graduating in the Netherlands, I worked there in the Netherlands for a bit, but soon after I moved to Sri Lanka and then worked in the practice of Channa Daswat, who had just taken over Jeffrey Bawa's practice after he passed away. And we started initially working on a series of models that were to be made of Jeffrey Bawa's works for an exhibition at the Frankfurter Architecture Museum. And it was interesting because models were never really part of Jeffrey Bawa's studio making of the models, of that process. So it was kind of the first time that really those kind of buildings were made into a smaller version. There were drawings of his works available that were of course known, these beautiful render drawings that everybody knows from the big books. But those were not necessarily the technical drawings. So figuring out how these buildings were actually made just from the drawings was impossible. So it's of course also involved making a lot of visits to Jeffrey Bawa's projects across the country and understanding the spatiality of it, understanding the making, understanding the essence, and then translating that into models. Interestingly, I got to know about Jeffrey Bawa's work quite a few years earlier, I think about 4 years earlier, when I did an exchange program at the School of Architecture in Ahmedabad. At CEPT, yes. And in the Netherlands, before that period, nobody knew of Jeffrey Bawa. So it was the first time actually when I visited CEPT that people showed me this work, and I was just completely amazed. And just seeing the pictures in the book is astonishing, but then later to actually visit those hotels and these homes and the Ludoganga Garden, for example, was a true eye-opener. One of the takeaways that we realized after sort of ingraining ourselves in the work of Jeffrey Bawa is that while the pictures always shows this complete harmony with nature, that in reality often the architecture was a result of very strong and very almost harsh interventions into the landscape. I'll speak about that in our lecture today. The Kandalama Hotel, for example, is actually a very rigid, almost industrial-like structure that is repeated, of a series of columns that are anchored violently into the rocks, quite brutal almost. But it's perhaps that contradiction between the architecture as an intervention and the architectural form and the man-made line and that of nature, which sort of wraps around this architecture and softens it and changes and it evolves and it adapts. That's what makes this architecture really special.
Is that what you meant when you wrote in the bio that his works are both distinctive but also they blend into nature? They stand
right.
apart but they also blend with the surroundings. I think
That's
you've written
right.
something like that in your website, I believe.
Yes, it's very important to understand that the architecture doesn't try to be nature. It doesn't try to be something else. It's not also shameful about being architecture and about being geometry, right? It is just that, and it's very honest in that sense.
What are few challenges that you face making your designs sustainable or energy efficient, especially in a climate or in a region like India, which has a tropical climate and which is a very growing economy?
Well, the main advantage is that you don't have to heat your houses, right? So you have actually a very comfortable climate and a comfortable temperature to live your daily lives throughout the year. The challenge at the moment is, of course, and this is not just recently, this has been for the last maybe 30, 40 years already, is that the people who, well, now urban people are the most populous people around the world, of course. They are getting used to living in a comfort which is climate controlled, which has just that adjustment that makes it more comfortable than just being out in the open. And it is always the same, and so you're always comfortable. So the challenge is to air condition your spaces, which involves then cutting yourself off from your environment. And that also means then that you lose that connection with nature along the way. You lose the feel of a breeze, you lose the feel of some humidity changes. And when we design, especially homes, for example, we always emphasize that part of living in a city, but certainly when urbanites move into the countryside to sort of be amongst nature, that you live with all the changes of the seasons and the daily fluctuations in temperatures and humidities.
Also the living beings, I believe, around you.
And yes, especially the animals and the creatures and the creepy crawlies and the monkeys and much more wildlife that we've also seen around. There are ways to that in architecture that are very subtle, and some of our houses are designed in a very open manner, where the clients are also very much sort of outdoorsy people, but still create enough buffer spaces that the indoors are comfortable on their own as well.
So you have mentioned that creating solutions where scarcity impacts architecture is one of your core values. For example, the Billion Bricks Home project, right?
Right.
Where you tackle homelessness. So could you elaborate on that a bit further?
Yes, I think we talk about scarcity, especially also in limitations of material resources, where materials are getting more and more scarce, right from just basic good quality sand that you need to use for concrete to cement that is of course quarried from large limestone quarries, to scarcity in certain stones that are not available anymore, wood, which is of course a scarce resource. And how do you actually maybe challenge yourself to find alternatives for using the right materials at the right place at the right moment. Of course, our practice builds well across Asia and in Europe as well, but especially across India. There are many different building cultures existing, which are, of course, originating from the earth, from the material of the earth, from that particular region. So we're very conscious to try and understand which materials are the right ones to use in the right place. And that doesn't mean that you always work with the material that is found there, because sometimes it's indeed already depleted. Sometimes you do have to work with materials that come from further away, but because they are harvested or quarried in a more sustainable manner, they are better materials to use than those that are found locally.
Could you give an example, any of your projects?
Well, one interesting example is maybe the other way around, is a project that we have done in Sitla, which is up in the Himalayas near Mukteshwar. And it takes about 4 hours drive up a windy road to get from the plains up to the mountains. And the mountains are made out of stone, right? They originate from what was earlier a seabed, just lifted up and then generated these beautiful rocky and dramatic mountain landscapes. And on the site that we were asked to design a house, the material that you find there is a local schist. It's a very soft sedimentary stone that sort of almost breaks apart if you touch it in one direction, but in the other direction it's a very hard stone. And people have been building houses with this for centuries, maybe millennia, but not anymore. Right now, because there's a ban on quarrying in Uttarakhand, you can't actually build a house anymore out of stone. You actually are forced to import cement, sand and gravel from the plains on these windy roads all the way there to build a concrete house. And a concrete house has become an aspirational thing. That is what people would like to build when they're thinking of a house. They don't like to build with stone houses anymore because it's seen as archaic, it's not modern. But we all know what is the most sustainable thing to do, and that is to build with the materials that are there. In this case, because all these materials from elsewhere have to be carted up so far and would have a huge impact on the carbon footprint. Luckily, we found really good stone on our site itself, and we're able actually to quarry below the house, below the foundation of the house, all the stone that we needed to actually build the house.
So how did you convince the people that this is the way to go?
By taking them around different houses around the region, the old houses, the houses that have been built by the British. There was a beautiful cow monastery from the British time that was still in use, built right on the edge of a sort of a cliff on the other side of forest. And in this beautiful setting, despite it being a bit rickety because of its age, it was such a convincing image, but also as the housing typology, the typology itself as a courtyard building with these sort of sheds for the cows. It was a beautiful thing that the client could also imagine, hey, this is something that somebody can live in. And of course you have then elements that you need to work with and innovate with, because these traditional homes, they're also very dark.
Yes.
They're built out of thick stone walls. You couldn't they couldn't make big openings in it, so they were very small openings. So inside it's dark. You can't read a book without having to turn on light, and it's a little depressing. So obviously the house that we designed is much different. It's much larger spans. There's much more glazing that can open fully, that can retract completely into the walls, so that again your inside space, the indoor rooms, are actually becoming outdoor rooms. They become verandas, and therefore encouraging also again this idea of being able to live outside during the various seasons.
In Kerala also, the traditional houses, the rooms are, especially retiring rooms, are small and dark, but then if you look at it, your retiring rooms have to be dark, right? Yes. But then there are a lot of courtyard spaces which you can use as living spaces. But again, when people aspire, they aspire for a house with a lot of light and ventilation, not remembering that light comes with heat.
That's right.
In a climate.
Yes,
like
especially if you don't shade it and cover it and protect it. Yes.
All right. So winding up, what do you envision is are some challenges and the future of architecture, especially in growing economies like India?
What is the challenge is that, of course, the sheer amount of construction that will be built in a country like India, and at the speed at which it's going, and in a relatively, I would say, maybe immature market where it's all about speed and about building for the sake of having built it rather than looking at quality, which risks that one builds a large housing stock or a large stock of offices that become unlivable in the near future, and also risk generating a huge amount of carbon. How do you tackle that is the big question. How do you evaluate while you're going at such speed? You also are able to perhaps pause at moments or reevaluate or keep checks on how things can improve rather than building as usual.
Would you like to give a message to our young viewers who are just budding architects and who has the future at their feet?
Well, the future has a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibilities, and I think it is what's interesting about it this time is that in just a short amount of years you can see the world changing very fast, and that does of course give you also the possibility to give a direction.
All right, thank you, Architect Robert.
Thank you.